Good evening, students. Welcome to the live coaching classes organized by Board of Studies, ICAI. As a protocol, whoever is watching me online, I request all of you to just give a thumbs up for the audio and the video and the presentation part so that I can confidently go with the discussion. And just to keep you updated, students, along with today's presentation, I have shared this Excel file, which is available on the Board of Studies portal. In this particular Excel file, I have given a couple of questions for our recap. So I'll first 10-15 minutes, what we would do is we will go ahead with our discussion on the topics what we have discussed so far with few questions and answers. Later, we'll come back to our today's discussion. And yes, thanks for the confirmation, Namita, Priya, and Geeta. Good evening, one and all. Let me quickly come back to my Excel file so that we will have a recap now. And students, I would request you to download this particular Excel file where I have given a sheet called recap. In this particular sheet, you have all these questions which have been posted. Let me just make it bold so that visibility is there. Yeah. Right. So let us have these questions and answers for these questions also. Now, let me do the basic formatting. Great. So the students' first question for today. TDS has to be deducted on all supplies received by a government authority whose value under a contract exceeds rupees 2,50,000. So this is a question which is posted for you. Let us have a quick recap. We have discussed the chapter called Payment of Taxes. In this chapter, Payment of Taxes, we have read under section 51. Section 51, which deals with your TDS related provisions. So under TDS provisions, there are 4 people, that is government authorities, government agencies, government offices, and notified people. So 4 set of people who have been notified, who have been mentioned in section 51, they are supposed to deduct TDS. Now, to answer to this question, we will say that TDS applicable on taxable goods or services. So first and foremost, students, the moment we see this 2.5 lakhs, don't jump into conclusion. The supply of goods and services taxable in the hands of the supplier is what we need to check into consideration. Now, naturally, when the registered person charges GST, then TDS comes into picture. If the invoice does not contain GST, so TDS recovery does not come into picture. So first point, you will say taxable value of goods or services, then TDS comes into picture. That means to say, if there are any supply of exempted goods, no TDS. And value for the purpose of section 51 shall exclude taxes. So when you are looking at this particular point, you have to mention clearly that the value of taxes have to be excluded for computing this 2.5 lakh. So that is how you will give your answer in your examination. So this is your first question. Let's move to the second question. Second question. Let me see. Hope this Excel file is visible, students. You are able to see the Excel file along with the questions clearly. So far, so good. No one has raised the issue that Excel is not visible. Great. Now, let us look at the second question. The second question says, only services supplied through e-commerce operator shall attract TCS under GST at the rate of 1% and not otherwise. Now, TCS provisions we have read under section 52. So this is detailed, covered under section 52. When we read these provisions of TCS, please recollect, there was no reference that only supply of goods or supply of services, this particular provisions of TCS gets attracted. Rather, it says that every e-commerce operator not being a agent shall collect an amount calculated at such rate not exceeding 1% as may be on the notified by the government on the recommendations of council of the net value of taxable supplies made through it. So when they say net value of taxable supplies, it includes goods and services. So answer for this particular question, you will say notified supply. All taxable supplies includes goods or services. No restriction for TCS applicability for services alone. This would be our answer, right? So this particular question, what we are trying to examine is that TCS provision applicable only for goods or is it for services? So we are going to say that this is applicable for both goods and services as well, right? Next, point number 3, question number 3. Mr. A, a registered person under GST, has filed a refund application. Mr. A, a registered person, has filed a refund application for rupees 800. The same has been rejected by the proper officer. Examine GST provisions. Examine GST provisions. Now, this particular registered person, Mr. A, filed a refund application. What did the officer did? He rejected the application. Now, what is the ground why he has rejected? Nothing was specified. Now, looking at the amount 800, is there a provision where my refund application should be exceeding a specified amount? Answer is yes. As per section 54, subsection 14, a refund application to be filed for an amount in excess of rupees 1,000. This is what the condition in terms of monetary limits which has been specified. Monetary limits which has been specified. Otherwise, no. Otherwise, there is no restriction. Now, one point we have to take into consideration in the process of discussion, you have to elaborate that. However, no such threshold is applicable. Excuse me for typographical errors. However, no threshold is applicable in case of a refund for the amount available in electronic cash ledger. So what you will say, whatever restriction is there with respect to amount, that is only in relation to CGST, SGST, UTGST or IGST or cess in respect of the electronic credit ledger. So when we refer to this section 54, the 1,000 is only in relation to credit ledger. Any amount which is referred in cash ledger, there is no restriction. So this is how we need to take care of while presenting our answer. Please make a note, all these questions, what we have been discussing over here will be tested for a value of for 2 marks in your examination, right? Coming back, question number 4. Supplier of goods to a SEZ developer has to file a refund application only for the goods which are duly authorized for SEZ operations. Now, this question is asking the important point. As a supplier, when I supply goods to a SEZ developer, is there a condition other than zero rated supply? So here we have to understand 2 aspects. Section 16 read with Rule 89. Section 16, when we say students, it is of IDTL Act. Now, when we refer to section 16, 2 supplies are qualified as zero rated supply. Supply of goods or supply of services exported out of India. Goods and services exported out of India. Supply of goods and services to SEZ unit or SEZ developer. These 2 aspects have been defined under section 16. So when I go for filing a refund application, under Rule 89. Rule 89 creates a need for claiming refund only in relation to authorized operations of a SAZ unit or developer. The student's answer would be yes. When a registered person files a refund, those goods and services should be meant for authorized operations. If it is not meant for authorized operations, refund is not entitled. So here, I draw your attention to this authorized operations where when we say it is meant for authorized operations, the bill, the invoice will be authorized where there is a endorsement by a SAZ officer. So this is one point which is to be examined under Rule 89. This is with respect to question number 4. Let me see if there are any questions so far on the points we have discussed. Namita gave an answer for that minimum value of refund of 1,000. This is applicable in relation to credit ledger, Namita, not in respect of cash ledger. So that is one point we need to take care of. Next. Question number 5. ITC refund is entitled on input services and capital goods in the case of zero-rated supplies without payment of tax, that is IGST, under Rule 89. So here we have been tested with a formula which we have used in relation to refund. So if we happen to travel to our discussion on refund, there's a formula we have used, right? So what is the formula? Let me just enlarge the file. Yeah. Zero-rated supply of goods or services, this is my numerator. Adjusted turnover is my denominator, multiplied by net ITC. So my net ITC, it includes inputs and input services. This is what we need to keep in mind. This net ITC shall not include capital goods. Shall not include capital goods. If you refer the formula, we have solved a problem. When we were looking at this problem, input tax credit, total ITC is 12,89,000. Now, net ITC, what we have done, inputs, input services. These two components we have taken into consideration. Capital goods was left alone, right? So coming back to our discussion, you would say that Rule 89, Sub-Rule 4 defines net ITC as inputs and input services and not capital goods. So this would be our answer in relation to question number 5. Students, you have any doubt on these questions which you need little elaboration, you can put your question into the question window, right? Next. Now, question number 6. Supplier of goods to EOU can be called as a merchant exporter for applying GST at the rate of 0.05% in the case of intrastate supplies. Now, if you recollect the definition of deemed exports, this covers 3 categories. What is that? First category, supply of goods under an advance authorization. Second, supply of goods to EPCG license holder. Third, supply of goods to a EOU. These three have been notified as deemed exports. Now, merchant export happens to be a mechanism where supplier supplies the goods to a person who exports those goods out of India. The other day, we had a discussion where Naveen is a person who is registered in the state of Kerala. Naveen doesn't have a nexus in UAE. Namita is one person who happens to have a business connect in UAE. So what does Naveen will do? Naveen raises the goods, supplies the goods to Namita. Namita in turn exports those goods to the party in UAE, United Arabian countries. So this transaction, Namita is an exporter. Naveen happens to be a merchant exporter. So what Naveen will do, Naveen will raise an invoice on Namita for 0.05% CGST, 0.05% SGST. If it is an interstate supply, 0.1% is a transaction value. So here, because the goods are supplied to a EO unit, answer would be supply of goods to an EOU shall be called as deemed exports, and applicable GST shall be charged. So 0.05% is not applicable in case of a EOU. This is the answer you have to give in this regard, right? Next, let's move to the question number 7. Moving further. Question number 7. Goods supplied by a registered person before they reach Indian territorial waters is considered as zero rated supply. Accordingly, no GST is applicable. What would be your answer? Question number 7. Question number 7. Goods are supplied by a registered person before these goods reach the Indian territorial waters. That means before the goods hit the Indian soil, before it reaches the taxable territory, the goods have been supplied. Can I call these goods as zero rated supply? Yes or no? If your answer is yes, does it comply with section 16? If your answer is no, then what you would call this transaction as? Students, please put your answer in the question window. Let me have your answer view. For this question number 7, what is your view? Before the goods hit the Indian territorial water, there is a supply. The question says that this is considered as a zero rated supply. If you say yes, why? If you say no, then what this transaction should be called as? Please put your answers into the question window. Suraj says yes, it is a zero rated supply. Okay. Vishal says no, it is not a zero rated supply. Okay. When you say Vishal, it is no, please mark your reason also. What would be this transaction called as? Others, what is your view? Sarvanan says no, it is high sea sales. Absolutely correct. Now, if it is a high sea sale, Sarvanan, is there GST applicable on this? Is there applicability of GST on this, Sarvanan? Geeta, Namita, Priya, Sairam, what would be your answer? Sarvanan, continuation to your answer. Vishal, no. Your answer is correct. It is not zero rated supply. Then what it will be called as? Question number 7. Geeta says no, it is not zero rated supply. Yes, Vishal. Now, Sarvanan is also right and Geeta is also right, but we have to give a clarification in the examination, students. Please keep in mind. Supply of goods by way of a transfer in title to those goods before they reach Indian territorial waters shall not be, or I'll say shall be considered as IC sale transaction. And not as a zero rated supply. Further, as per Schedule 3, entry 8B, this transaction shall be neither a supply of goods nor supply of services. Please recap your provisions which we have discussed while doing a calculation of aggregate turnover. So you have to be very, very clear with your points of contention when you are solving the questions. Good. Now, question number 8. Little interesting. I will give you 2 minutes. Students, please do the calculation of compute the adjusted turnover for claiming refund under Rule 89 on the basis of the information below. Let me just do the alignment. Okay. First point, they have given certain transactions, students. Based on these transactions, we have to calculate what is the adjusted turnover. Supply of goods located outside India to a customer situated abroad. There is a transaction where goods are supplied which are there outside India to a customer who is located abroad. That is transaction A. Transaction B. Sale of used motor vehicle whose written down value on the date of sale is rupees 1,82,000 for rupees 2,45,000. Clause C. Supply of goods wholly exempt under GST 8,96,000. Supply of goods at a concessional rate to ISRO under a specific notification for the approved projects 8,64,000. Services rendered to a SEZ unit without payment of IGST. Interest on IT refund received for assessment year 15-16. So students, these are the transactions which are given. From these 6 transactions, please let me know what is the adjusted turnover for the purpose of Rule 89. I'll give you 2 minutes. Right or wrong, make an attempt and give your answer. For other students who have missed out on this refund, please look at this formula. Adjusted turnover is a turnover in the state, which excludes the value of zero rated supply for services. And also, this excludes your exempt supply. So what I'll do, I'll exclude zero rated supply of services. I'll add value received for the money for zero rated supply. Exempt supply I'll exclude. Turnover for 4A, 4B, this I'll be excluding. So this is a formula given under Rule 89. For your convenience, I'll just mark that over here. I'll give you 2 minutes, students. Please let me know what is the value as per your calculation. Oh, yes, Namita. Sorry, I missed out. Namita has answered for question number 7. No, it is not a zero rated supply as it is not an export nor SEZ supplies to SEZ developer unit. It is neither supply of goods nor services. Perfect, Namita. It is covered as per Schedule 3, neither supply of goods nor supply of services. I agree with your answer, Namita. Others, please do the calculation for this question number 8 and quickly give your answers, ma. Give your answers. I'll wait for another 30 seconds. Let me know your answer. I'll do the calculation based on your responses. Till now, I haven't received any answer yet. Namita is the first person to give an answer. 23,94,000. Okay. I got an answer for 23,94,000. Okay. Rest. I'll start my explanation for this problem. Now, to start with, first transaction, supply of goods located outside India to a customer situated abroad. Now, students, I draw this transaction to clause 7 of schedule 3. If you refer to schedule 3, supply of goods which are located in a non-taxable territory to a person in a non-taxable territory. Here, supply of goods which are located outside India to a customer who is also located outside India. So because the goods are elsewhere, that is out of taxable territory, and also the customer is out of taxable territory, we refer to clause 7 of schedule 3. So whereby we say neither a supply of goods nor services. Now, will it fit into exempt supply? Answer is no. Will it fit into taxable supply? Answer is no. So because it doesn't fit either over there or here, my value for this transaction is 0. Here I have put value for adjusted turnover, that is rule 89. Rule 89. Next, sale of old used motor vehicle whose sale consideration is 2,45,000 and a written down value on the date of sale is rupees 1,82,000. I don't know how many of you have come across this discussion on exemption and value. There is a notification called 8 of 2018 Central Tax Rate. As per this particular notification, sale of old used motor vehicle, the sale value, that is consideration, should be sale value less WDV as per Income Tax Act, right? So here we will presume that this particular transaction is including GST. So what will happen here? 2,45,000 minus 1,82,000. First, if the value is greater than 0, we will go for tax calculation. If the value is negative, we will exclude that particular value from calculation of GST. And this into 100 divided by 118. I make an assumption that the value the goods which are supplied attract GST at the rate of 18%. So this happens to be my supply value. I'll make an assumption over here. Note, it is assumed that motor vehicle sold attracts GST at the rate of 18%. Now, for benefit of other students, I'll explain this transaction once again. Here, there is a reference to notification 8 of 2018. What this notification says, on the date of sale of the motor vehicle, sale consideration will be compared with the book value of asset. If the book value of asset is less than sale consideration, the net margin will be the value for the purpose of GST calculation. If my book value is higher than the sale value, which is negative, I'll ignore that for my transaction value. Since this transaction value is exceeding, it is positive, what I have done, I did 2,45,000 minus 1,82,000 multiplied by 100 divided by 118. Why I have done this? Whatever 63,000 we have received, we presume that this is including GST. So when I say 18% is the rate of tax, 100 divided by 118, I'll get my taxable value. So this is a value for the purpose of adjusted turnover. Point number 3, supply of goods wholly exempt under GST. Now, if you look into this particular definition, students, less exempt supply. My total turnover in state excludes my exempt supply. So for that particular reason, I'll not take this into consideration. Exempt supply to be excluded. Right? Next. Next. Supply of goods at a concessional rate to ISRO. Now, what is happening here? There is a specific exemption notification where Vignesh sir has discussed at length. Any goods which are supplied under a particular contract where a certificate is issued by a scientist having a particular rank, the original rate of tax will be reduced to the extent of whatever be the original rate of tax, 5% will be the effective rate of tax. Now, are these goods taxable? Answer is yes, taxable. However, there is a slight reduction in rate of tax. So I'll say there is a exemption for reduction in rate of tax. However, it is a taxable supply. Students, don't worry, I'll share this Excel file after today's session. This you can download and verify these answers once again. So for the purpose of zero rate supply, I take that into consideration. Services rendered to a SEZ unit without payment of IGST. Now, if you recollect this definition of zero rated supply, there was a condition with respect to exports where I receive money in convertible foreign exchange. Only that particular zero rated supply has been kept outside for the purpose of my denominator. This zero rated supply will be considered for the purpose of adjusted turnover. So answer for this will be 12,24,000. No specific exclusion since money not received in convertible foreign currency. Right? Next. Interest on IT refund. Now, any money which is referred as interest is exempted under notification 12 of 2017 central tax rate. Since it is exempted, my value will be 0. So considering all these explanations, my value for the purpose of adjusted turnover shall be 21,41,390 rupees. 21,40,390 rupees. This is a value in consideration. Let me see if there are any questions so far. 23,94,000. Slightly there is a difference, Namita. Please check where you went difference in the calculation. Namita asked this question, sir, in adjusted turnover, zero rated supply of services to be deducted, then why it is added again? Namita, just look at this formula. Adjusted turnover excludes zero rated supply of services and again added back. Now, what we have done, whatever you have raised an invoice for zero rated supply, I exclude that. What I have to add back, money received in foreign currency, plus invoices raised in the period, in the relevant period for which advance is received prior to the relevant period, less the money which is received in advance where my invoice to that extent has not been raised. So I recommend you to recap this presentation, what we have discussed in relation to zero rated supply of services, Namita. There was a clear, if you recollect one slide, after the break, I'll just take you through this particular slide where there are 3 elements to take into consideration. I think somewhere, yeah. You remember this discussion, Namita? What we do, foreign currency received during relevant period, April to September. To that, I add invoices raised during this relevant period, this April to September, for this period where invoice was raised, For those invoices, money was received in advance prior to April. And to that, I'll deduct whatever money was received in April to September, for which no invoice was raised at all. So this is the value. I'll add back, Namita. That is how I exclude one and I add back something else. Hope this point of content explanation is clear, Namita. Next. In which chapter this rule for motor vehicle comes? This motor vehicle comes in valuation under GST, Namita. This is a specific chapter, valuation. Their discussion in relation to motor vehicle will be discussed. So far, there are no further doubts in relation to the discussion. Let me quickly come to question number 9. Relevant period for excess money paid in relation to provisional assessment shall be the date of payment, that is money deposited for claiming refund under section 54. So this question is asking what is a relevant period. So in case of a provisional assessment, what will be my relevant period? To provisional assessment, it says shall be the date of payment. So they're asking, is this the day when I made the money for provisional assessment will be considered as the relevant period? What would be our answer? Section 54. We had a detailed discussion point by point. So with respect to provisional assessment, date of final assessment order received for the application filed in relation to provisional assessment. So this would be our answer. It is not the date of payment, rather it is the day when my final assessment order has been passed. So this is my relevant period. Examination students, please wait and watch. 2 marks will be the relevant point they'll ask into consideration. Next, there's one question which actually it's a technical point which Namita has raised the other day in our discussion. So this particular question says that a show cause notice was issued where on this particular registered person called ABC Private Limited. In the show cause notice, there was a quantification: tax for 58,000, interest nil, penalty nil. So this is the amount which was shown in the show cause notice. However, the concerned authority who have passed an order post a personal hearing, what he has confirmed in this particular order, he has raised a demand for tax 58,000, interest as applicable, penalty 58,000. This is what happened in the order. Now, if you recollect, there is a provision called Section 75. Section 75 clearly explains the moralities, the general provisions in relation to determination of a tax. So under this subsection 7, clearly they say that the amount of tax, interest and penalty demanded in an order shall not be in excess of the amount which is specified in a notice. So what you will say as per section 75, subsection 7, tax along with interest and penalty demanded in an order shall not exceed the amount quantified in a notice. This is what you answer. So first you will give an answer saying that the act done by the officer concerned is erroneous. Later you will say that. However, reference to section 75, subsection 9. Applicability of interest not mentioned in a order is a mechanical provision for collection of tax along with interest. Tax not paid So what this section 75 says, students, first and foremost, when a show cause notice is given, the demand as per show cause notice should match with my order. My order, that means the adjudicating authority cannot raise a demand. Now, in this case, what happened? Interest as applicable, penalty 58,000. This officer went beyond the demand as per my show cause notice. It is completely not in line with the law. Only with respect to interest, by section 75, subsection 9, clearly says that if the order has not mentioned anything towards interest, if the person has to pay tax which was not paid, interest is mechanical provision. This is what you will explain with respect to your this question number 10. Now, let's come back to our topic for today's discussion. This intent of today's discussion, students, just to have a recap of whatever we have discussed so far. If you look at these 10 questions, just put yourself in terms of ranking, how many questions you could answer. If you can answer at least 8 questions out of what we have discussed today, I would say your preparation is in line for your examination. If your answers is somewhere between 5 to 7, I would say put a little more efforts. If your answers is less than 5, I would say take it seriously, gear up for your examinations. This is just a caution based on your performance. So let us start with our today's discussion on this chapter called Offences and Penalties under GST law. So today's class, we are going to discuss on this, what are the nature of offences, and for each that offence, what is the penalty which is to be discussed. And this penal provisions, is it a specific penal provision or in general penal provision? When I say specific, is it applicable to the person who has committed an offence, or is it in general they are referring to the penal provisions? When we talk about penalty provisions, there are certain general principles which one of the officer concerned has to follow. We will understand what are the various disciplines the officer has been governed with. What are the powers which are given to an officer for imposing a penalty, for waiving a penalty? Confiscation. In the process of our discussion, we will look at certain provisions of which connected with the confiscation of goods and the corresponding the activity which officer takes on those confiscated goods. Liability of officers and certain other persons. In the process of this audit, assessment, or review mechanism, the government officer, being a custodian of a data which is a confidential data of a registered person, what is the responsibility casted on the officers and certain other persons? Like example, GSTN. GSTN is a private entity. It is not a government entity. It is a joint venture. Any data which is breached from the GSTN point of view, what are the responsibilities casted under this particular chapter? Cognizance of offence and compounding of an offence. There is a mechanism where whenever there is an offence which is a cognizable offence, where there is a punishment under the CRPC provisions, Criminal Code of Procedure. If there are any CRPC provisions where arrest warrant without bail comes into picture, there is a mechanism called compounding of an offence. We'll understand those particular mechanisms. Finally, what is it we have to learn from this particular today's chapter? This is a little lengthy chapter. Before we start with this, to draw your attention, why is that we need to study what is there in store for us? I'll take you through this particular overview. We have discussed with our preliminary aspects called assessment and audit, where we went through that section 61, 62, 63, 64, 65. Assessment of non-filer of people who are not filed returns or returns filed by the registered person. Assessment of people who are not registered under GST. Summary assessment. All these are your assessment provisions. From this particular aspect, we went further to discuss and understand on various aspects called this, what you call demand and recovery. That means when we have understood that how a show cause notice will be issued, in the process of issuing a notice, how they will quantify the duty along with the tax, along with interest, along with penalty. We had discussed on demand and recovery provisions, where a show cause notice will be issued. Now, for doing so, the officer concerned has to rely upon a topic called offences and penalty. This is a chapter which gives a direction, where for each of the offences noted, for each of the offences which exist, who is the person who is responsible, and this particular person, what is the penalty to be levied. So this particular chapter, what we are going to discuss in today's discussion, which starts with section 122, chapter 19 of GST law. My offences and penalties is going to give a guidance, is going to give a direction under what circumstances, what offence which is conducted, how the demand and recovery has to be made by the proper officer. So this is a guiding factor for my demand and recovery provisions. Now, to have a bird's eye view, I'll come to this slide in a while. Okay, let me discuss this before we go further. Principles of jurisprudence, that is principles of law where penalty provisions are discussed. Whenever we talk about penalty, please keep in mind, penalty comes where there is a non-performance of an expected activity or an activity which is against the law. I repeat, any activity done which is not in line with the law, any activity done which is not where there is a performance to be done but not done. Example, in India, when we drive a two-wheeler, it is expected that we should drive only on the left side of the road. If I drive on the right side of the road, it is a punishable offense. When I drive, expectation that you should have a helmet, you should have a valid driving license. So any of these offenses you have committed, you have breached the jurisprudence, you have breached the expected act, then penal action, that is punishment, comes into picture. How does the punishment happen in the tax law? One, you will be punished with a value, that is money, which needs to be paid, or you will be punished where a deprival, you will be barred from filing of returns, you will be barred from preparation of an e-waiver. Either of these two are referred to as by penal provisions. Prosecution. Students, when I talk about this chapter, I would draw your attention, very, very important. Like, if you happen to read this, the Kandas in Ramayana, one of the particular point in time, Ravana says that, look, you guys are blessed enough, where you have been trained with a sage called Vasishtha, who made you capable of understanding what are the do's and don'ts. Because of Maharshi Vasishtha, you have been in a great position for the way people look up to you as a Yoga Purush. Similar to that, when we read this particular chapter 19, this entire chapter 19 is good enough for us to say, whoever assessee comes to your office or you act as a consultant, you can advise that, look, these activities please take into consideration. If you are through with these particular activities, you are taken away from your penal provisions. So this 2.5 hours discussion, what we are going to have, we will focus only on those provisions where we try to mitigate or reduce the friction from the non-compliance. Prosecution is a proceeding under CRPC provisions against a person. Fraud, misrepresentation, suppression. Vis-a-vis a person who is not a fraudster. If you recollect the previous session, demand and recovery, we have discussed what is a fraud, misrepresentation, suppression of facts. How we have to guide and assessing every box of the thing, of the transactions, to keep the assessee saying that he is not a fraudster or willful defaulter or having an intent to suppress. how we make good of the assessee concern. Next, we also discuss bailable offense versus non-bailable offense when we go through these particular discussions in today's chapter. Now, chapter 19, as I have mentioned to you, it is going to cover in detail section 122 to section 138. 122, it's the lengthiest chapter we have. Roughly 45 minutes we are going to spend only on this section 122. This one, section 122 is a mother for origination for all the demand and recovery, all the notices which we see under GST. So section 122 has listed certain offences. For those offences, they have identified what they are going to demand. Section 123, failure to furnish information written. The other day, I gave an example with respect to anti-evasion. I'll explain in detail when I come to section 123. 124, where there is a failure to furnish statistics by a particular notified persons. Section 125, general penalty. Wherever you don't get an answer, way to levy penalty, 125 comes into rescue of an officer concerned. Section 126, in the process of levying penalty, this section 126 sets a note, sets a tone for the officer, how the principles have to be relied upon in terms of quantifying the penalty. Section 127, power to impose penalty in certain cases. There is a certain specified note cases where 127 gives the clarity. Section 128, to waive penalty or fee. There is one student, I think Amit or some student asked, what is the amnesty scheme? This section 128 is dealing with the amnesty scheme. 129, detention, seizure, release of goods. Students who are appearing for May 2022 and November 2022, you need not study this particular 129, which is amended as of today. Complete revamp happened for May 2022. Section 129, what I'm going to discuss in today's session, is applicable only for May 2022 examination. Reason, Jan 2022, this section 129 completely revamped. Section 130, confiscation of goods, that is taking into custody of certain goods, and severe harsh provisions discussed under section 130. Section 131, confiscation or penalty not to interfere with other punishments. This section 131 comes and explains that an offense, a confiscation under any other law will not deprive the right under this particular GST law. I discuss in detail in this section 131. 132 deals with certain offenses. I would say the draconian provision under section 132. I would say in your lifetime, you shouldn't come across a situation where assessee knocks at your door having offenses committed under 132. I would say a criminal provisions covered under 132. We will discuss in detail what is happening under 132. Section 133, which deals with liability of officers and certain other persons. So in relation to penal provisions, sir, is it that the only registered person you're going to punish? Is it not the government officer? We will discuss under 133. 134, cognizance of offences, to identify what is punishable, what is non-punishable. And section 135, what happens in court of law? Existence of a culpable mental state of affairs. 136, relevance of taken into consideration. Whether that statement holds good, or again, a statement has to be called afresh. Offences by companies. Now, in this particular section, we will read and understand what is there in store for a director, what is there in store for a partner, what is there in store for a karta of a HUF, what is their roles and responsibilities. Finally, compounding of offences. Now, if time permits, we will travel till 138. If not, I'll try to cover at least till section 132 in our today's discussion. Now, first and foremost, the tone for this section 122, whatever activities which are prescribed under CGST, SGST, UTGST, equivalent provisions are covered under IGST law. Proper officer determined or deemed under state law is equivalent to be a proper officer under central GST. Right? Penalty which has been quantified under CGST gets straightly applicable under state or UTGST related provisions. For the purpose of this definition called registered person, the term registered person excludes this person who's having a UIN, unique identity number, which is assigned to your embassy or WHO, World Bank. These are all the entities where this registered person is kept away. Taxable person, a person who is registered or liable to be registered. Now, let's start with our master section called 122. This is one section which is a lengthy section. All your activities which are covered under section 122, I've tried to put into 4 buckets. First bucket called procedural lapses. All your lacuna, like example, sir, I have to have a GST number to be printed on my notice name board. Officer who comes for inspection, my GST registration certificate should be displayed, not displayed. I call that as a procedural lacuna. Next, moving on further. Fraud, suppression of facts. I have a warehouse taken at 4 buildings apart from my building. As a registered person, I'm supposed to add that warehouse at an additional place of business. I haven't done. I have supplied goods without raising an invoice. I have given a statement called sales register to my GST officer in the process of the audit. I know that I have suppressed few transactions. Again, I call this as a bucket number 2. Third bucket, connected with my registration. Fourth bucket, which is connected with your non-payment of taxes. Money which is collected by way of taxes to be deposited but not deposited. Or I have been a registered person. My registration was cancelled. I was not supposed to collect taxes. Collection of taxes beyond cancellation is a contravention of collection of taxes. So these are the 4 buckets where I club all my offences into 4 categories, right? We will run through one by one the list of those 21 offences. As of today, section 122 has listed 21 offences. So as I discuss through this provision, students, I would recommend all of you just keep observing these entries. Wherever you don't find an answer, put into the question window. We will go back and examine these particular provisions. Now, as I take you through these provisions, I draw your attention to page number 21.4. As we discussed with the students, please make a mark in your study material for quick reference of these particular aspects concerned. There's one question from Namita. Question number 4, authorized operations is not in section 16 for claiming refund. This is not in section 16, Namita. This is there under Rule 89. Rule 89, when we put a refund application, they have mentioned clearly, SSN, it should be made for authorized operations, right? Now, section 122, first point, where there is a supply of goods or services both without issuing a tax invoice, or issues an incorrect or false invoice with regard to any supply. So there is a supply where invoice to be issued but invoice not issued. Recollect your demand and recovery. There was one of the provision and demand and recovery where on the authorization of a commissioner, a tax officer can go for purchase of goods or services to check whether supplier is issuing a tax invoice. So where there is a supply of goods without a tax invoice, it is an offense. This is your point number 1. Next, point number 2. Issues an invoice or a bill without actual supply of goods. So there is a invoice which is given, but actually the goods and services are not issued. We call this as bill trading. Collects an amount as tax but fails to pay the same to the government beyond 3 months from the date on which such payments becomes due. Now, collects an amount but fails to pay beyond a period of 3 months. Now, what is happening here? A money was collected as tax. This was not paid to the government beyond 3 months. Now, when you recollect this particular provision, collection of tax, penal provisions, Section 122 talks about 3 months. Section 122 talks about 3 months. Section 73, if you recollect, Section 73, that talks about recovery of a penalty for a tax which is not paid, self-assessed tax which is not paid beyond a period of 30 days. So under Section 73, there is a reference to tax not paid. Make a note. I'll discuss in detail with respect to this point number 3. In your working note, make a reference. Section 73, subsection 14. Section 73, subsection 11. Section 73, subsection 11. Hyphen. Tax not paid within a period of 30 days. Within a period of 30 days from the due date. Section 73, within brackets 11. Then below that, you can make a note. Section 76, tax collected but not paid. Tax collected but not paid. Below that, write down Section 122, subsection 1, tax collected but not paid beyond 3 months. So students, I have various aspects. 1 month, I'll go for Section 73. Beyond 3 months, I'll come to Section 122. Money not paid, I'll come to Section 76. These 3 provisions I'll discuss at length. Just wait for another 45 minutes. Moving further. Point number 4. Collects any tax in contravention of the provisions of this Act. Collects any tax in contravention of the provisions of this Act. Now, what is the difference between point 3 and point 4? Here also there is a collection. Now, clause 3 says collection of a tax, failure to pay beyond 3 months. Point number 4 says that collection in contravention of the provisions. You can think of registration. A registered person whose registration was cancelled. The moment your registration is cancelled, you're not supposed to collect taxes. So any money you've collected in contravention. Now, how do I know, sir? Sir, I checked the registration number of the supplier. It was cancelled, but still he is collecting taxes. This point number 4, the difference between point number 3 and point number 4. Point number 3, I have collected, but I haven't paid to the government beyond 3 months. Point number 4 says that you have collected in contravention. You don't have an authority, you have collected. That is your point number 4. Point number 5. Fails to deduct tax in accordance with provisions of 51. Deducts amount less than what to be deducted. 1, I have not deducted. Section 51 dealing with my TDS provisions. So I have to deduct TDS, I have not deducted. Or I have deducted TDS which is less than the amount what needs to be deducted. Or fails to pay the amount to government. I have not deducted, I have short deducted, having deducted, not paid. Any of these 3 things, again, this is a offense under point number 5. Now, the moment we expect TDS, we can expect the provisions of TCS, Section 52, TCS. Similar provisions. Fails to collect TCS, or amount collected is less than what need to be collected, or amount not paid to the government. So you have a TCS, you have not deducted, you have short deducted, or deducted but not paid. Then penalty under Section 122 can be invoked. Point number 7. Takes or utilizes input tax credit without actual receipt of goods or services. Takes or utilizes. Now, I'll draw your attention to this term called takes the input tax credit, utilizes the input tax credit. Now, before we discuss at length at this point, let me come back to my Excel file and I'll give an example. Then we'll come back to this point of discussion, students. Mr. X, an accountant, has availed ITC of rupees, say 91,000 instead of rupees 19,000 for both CGST and SGST. However, okay, the above ITC, has been shown in GST 3B for June 21. So what happened here? Accountant has taken a credit of 91,000 instead of 90,000. Now, do you say this is a fraud, willful misstatement, suppression? When you look at this entry, is it a fraud? Is it a willful misstatement? Is it suppression? What do you categorize this? What do you categorize? Out of these three allegations, do you say, is it a fraud? Is it a willful misstatement? Is it a suppression? What do you say? Let me look at your answers. Yes, Namita. Composition also can be called as a contravention. Tax collected by a composition registered person. Yes, your point is valid. So for this entry of 91,000 as 19. Wonderful. Namita says, as per the proper officer, it is a fraud. Ramakrishnan says, it is only an error, not a fraud, willful misstatement, suppression. Aptly said, Namita. Now, very valid point. This is like any ordinary person looks at this, they'll say, sir, instead of entering 19, it was entered as 91. Is there a culpable offense? Is there a fraud? If I say it is a fraud, my 19,000, I would have accounted as 85,000. I could have accounted as 68,000. I haven't done that. 19 was entered as 91. Now, to prove that it is not a fraud, I'm going to say that ITC has been reversed in July 21, having noted the error. However, ITC for June 21 is sufficient enough and no SGST or CGST has been utilized. Now, read through these 2 points, students, carefully. Point number 1. Having noted that I did a mistake, in July 21, I have reversed. Now, there is a table for the ITC reversals I've shown there. Third point, in the month of June 21, when I filed my return, I never touched that 19,000. I never touched that 91,000. That means whatever output tax I have to pay, I had sufficient balance in IGST. I have paid through that. Now, look at this point. ITC availed and utilized. ITC availed or utilized. Now, point number 1, ITC availed or utilized. Point number 2, ITC availed and utilized. I ask a question to you. I have written 2 statements here. The given example, does it fit into statement number 1 or statement number 2? I repeat my question. This given transaction done by X, does it fit into statement 1 or statement 2? ITC availed and utilized, ITC availed or utilized. Where does it fit into? Give your answer, students. Sairam gave his answer, willful misstatement. Geeta says intentionally done. If it is done intentionally, it is a fraud. Akshay says it is a willful misstatement. Okay. Your points may be, see, like Namita has given her view. It could be a proper officer's view that it is a fraud, it is a willful misstatement, it is a suppression. Now, it could be anything. Like I wouldn't say Sairam or Geeta or Akshay, your points are incorrect. I would say it is correct from the officer's point of view. Now, it is responsibility of us. How do we make that as a non-fraud, non-willful misstatement, not suppression? Let's look into that angle. Sarvanan says statement 2 is applicable. Okay. Others view, students? Good. Sairam says statement 1. Namita says statement 2. Answer is statement 2. Answer is statement 2. Your statement 1, ITC availed and utilized, incorrect. Availed and utilized. I should have availed and I should have utilized that. Right? Now, in this case, the input tax credit has been taken. The input tax credit has been taken, but not utilized. So, when we talk about this particular transaction, ITC availed and utilized, ITC availed or utilized. I've availed, I'm not utilized. Even then, a penalty can be attracted. I'm just drawing your attention to this point. So when we talk about penal provisions, ITC taken or utilized without actual receipt of goods or services, or both, either fully or partially. Now, when we talk about without actual receipt of goods or services, please look at your section 16. I'll give an example. I have my supplier called Akshay. Akshay is in the state of Maharashtra. Praveen is a registered person in the state of Karnataka. Akshay handed over the goods to my transporter at his factory in Pune. I repeat this point. Akshay handed over the goods to my transporter at his factory gate in Pune. The moment the transporter leaves the factory gate, I have accounted, I'm a registered person in Karnataka, I've accounted the goods as if it was received. I've availed the input tax credit in relation to those goods. Now, please refer to section 16. There's an explanation given under subsection 2. Any person who received goods or any person who is representing the registered person as an agent or otherwise before or after transfer of title to those goods shall be deemed to be a such registered person as received the goods. Drawing the explanation given in clause section 2, without actual receipt of goods or services, when we read to this, we have to look into the commercial terms. Is it X works? Is it CAF? If it is a X works transaction, the moment material crosses the factory gate, that is good enough for me. If it is a CAF transaction, CIF, till the factory gate of mine, the receipt didn't happen. So this is how we need to interpret when the department draws your point of contention, availment or utilization without actual receipt of goods or services. So here, mere accounting is they're not looking. You have accounted or you have utilized without even receiving the goods, which is in contravention of section 16. That is what they are talking about. Fraudulently obtains refund under this act. There is a fraud under which a refund has been obtained. What do you mean by fraud? How there could be a fraud? Sir, I have filed an application. I know that Rule 89, Sub-Rule 4, there is a restriction. If I am a supplier where I have received as a merchant expert or deemed exports, I cannot file under Sub-Rule 4 or export with payment of taxes. I should not be in so-and-so receipts. Now, having known that I have violated, I filed a refund application. So again, penal provisions under clause 8 will be attracted. Takes or distributes input tax credit in contravention of section 20. This section 20 deals with your ISD, input service distributor. So as ISG, you have received the goods or you have received services which was distributed erroneously, which is distributed wrongly. Falsifies or substitutes financial records or produces fake accounts or documents or furnishes any false information or written with an intention to evade payment of tax due under this act. Now, falsifies financial records or substitutes financial records or produce fake accounts or documents, furnishes false information or written with an intention to evade payment of tax. Now, this is very, very hard aspect to prove. As Namita was telling in her answer, Namita, Akshay, Geeta, all of your points are very valid. Officer consent says, look, you as a registered person, you gave a fraudulent information. You have an intent to not payment of tax. This is a point which we need to substantiate before the next level, that is your appeal at a tribunal, appellate authority, tribunal, high court, Supreme Court. What gives a important here is whatever documents you have given, those documents match with the signed financials. I draw your attention, students. Whenever some information was asked by the proper officer in the process of their audit under section 65, if I gave an information that is sales register, purchase register, input tax reconciliation, GSTR 2A downloaded data, bank statement which was taken. Now, any information which I have given, knowingly that it is incorrect, this clause comes into applicability saying that there is an intent to evade payment of tax. So be very, very careful with respect to information which was given to the GST officer. The taxable person is liable to be registered but fails to obtain a registration. Furnishes a false information with regards to registration particulars. Many cases we have seen that where a registration was obtained, there was no existence of the person itself at the time of applying for registration or subsequently. Recently, there was a raid which happened in the state of Rajasthan. In the process of the raid, the person who has been held to be a culprit, who was held to be a plaintiff, who have been charged with the charge sheet. This gentleman says, officer, name is mine, mobile number is mine, but the registration and all, none of are pertaining to me. I have a cousin he has a cousin who had done all these activities on his behalf. My cousin asked for an OTP, I gave an OTP. I never knew that he has taken a registration in this particular premises. He, in a good faith, he has taken some of documents. I never knew that he took a registration and done these aspects. Now, it is very important for the person to prove and establish that it doesn't have a culpable offense, but a stage of affairs to conduct this particular thing. So any data which was given erroneous at the time of registration, even that is a punishable offense. Obstructs or prevents an officer in discharge of his duties. We have seen a video recently when there was an e-waiver transaction. There was a fight happened between the officer and the assessee. Assessee has attacked the officer from doing his job. But both the things went came around. So if any officer is doing his job, if the registered person prevents or obstructs the officer, it is a punishable offense. Transports any taxable goods without the cover of documents as may be specified. Now, transportation of taxable goods. You know that section 68, which deals with the documentation required in relation to transportation of goods, tax invoice or a delivery chellan or a bill of supply, along with that e-waiver which is notified under Rule 138. Any of these documents are not there as a cover for the purpose of transportation of taxable goods. It is a punishable offense under section 122. Suppression of turnover leading to evasion of tax. Fails to keep or retain books of accounts under the provisions of this Act. Like we discussed section 35 right with rule 56, the production register, your advances register, tax paid, tax receipt, all these details if I have to maintain for a period of that 72 months, I have defaulted, then again it is a punishable offense. Fails to furnish information or documents called by an officer in accordance with the provisions of this Act or rules made thereunder, or furnishes a false information during any proceedings. See, there was an audit conducted. I failed to give an information called for. The proper officer called, Praveen, you give your bank statement. I said, look, you don't have a right to call for. I always obstructed, I defended myself and I never gave the information which was called for. Punishable offense under the GST. Supplies or transport or stores goods which has a reason to believe that these are liable for confiscation. Now, I'll give an example. I don't want to distract your attention. In most of the movies, it so happens that a person who transports the goods, he knows very well that this is a punishable offense. He knows that this activity is a fraudulent activity. So a person who supplies those goods, a person who transports those goods, a person who stores those goods, there are three persons: supplier, transporter, owner of a godown or a warehouse. Any of these three persons have a reasons to believe that the goods which are in transaction are liable for confiscation. Why confiscation? No tax invoice, not permitted as per the law. GST was not paid. It was stored without authority of law. There was no valid document for movement. Any of these occasions, these three persons will be held as a punishable offense under this entry 18. Issues a invoice or a document by using the registration number of another person. It so happens like initially when GST has come, like they raise an invoice, GST number something was quoted, Aram se, without even bothering that, they're like all B2C transactions. You go to a particular shop, you buy electronic devices, and that shop fellow sells the goods and he gives an invoice. You say GST and you have paid GST and you will walk up from there. But when you actually go back, say ABC and Sons, it is a shop name. Bill was given by in the name of A, which is a proprietorship. ABC and Sons is a partnership firm or CHUF. The bill was given in the name of A. Second day you go, bill will be given in the name of B. Third day you go, bill will be named of C. A, B, C never supplied the goods, but bills were given by ABC and Sons. Now, this is a case where invoice was given in a wrong GST number. Tampers or destroys the material evidence or document. If you recollect section 67, inspection, search and seizure. Evidence which was collected was tampered, was destroyed. There was this movie called Drishyam, one of very good sequel which has come in second series. In this second movie, Drishyam 2, the so-called leading hero, who is the personality, tampers the evidence which is in the custody of an officer. Tampering or destroying evidence or a document, either at the officer's premises or at any other location. Finally, the last entry, dispose of or tampers the goods which have been detained or seized. Under section 67, I cannot take the goods from the existing premises because of various reasons. So what I'll do, I'll say these goods should be detained under your control. You should not dispose of this until and unless I permit to do so. But those goods have been disposed of, or there was a change of the goods itself, which have been seized under section 67. So students, any of these 21 entries are notified as offences which are punishable under GST. Now, having noted this 21 entries, what is the offence? What is the penalty? The law says that penalty will be higher of 10,000 or amount equivalent to tax evaded, amount equivalent to tax to be deducted but not deducted, amount of tax to be collected but not collected, input tax availed or passed on or distributed irregularly, refund claimed fraudulently. Now, all this 21 you make into 4 buckets. If you find out that there is a tax which is evaded, either 10,000 or this amount, whichever is higher. Example, sir, I have collected tax without permission of law. Like Namita said, I'm a person registered as Section 10. As a composition registered person, I should not collect tax. I have collected tax in contravention of the law. So what does the law says that penalty equivalent to 10,000 or tax evaded. As a composition person, I have collected and I have not paid that tax. So the tax which was evaded, that will be subjected to recovery. So as a composition person, I have collected say 85,000 as tax, but I have paid only on the turnover that 1%, which is less than that 85,000. So if there is a tax evasion, 10,000 or 85,000, whichever is higher, will be quantified and paid. As an ISD, you have passed on input tax credit more than what you have to pass on. So that amount or 10,000, whichever is higher, will be a penalty. So this is what my section 122 discuss on penal provisions. Before I go to section 123, let me see quickly if there are any questions so far. Sairam says in relation to invoice trading, raising a dummy invoice without actually supplying goods or services. Yes, Sairam, you have the material in your inventory, you raised an invoice, you didn't supply the goods or services. Now, when the department officer comes for inspection, how do you prove is a matter of question to deal with section 122. Okay, Namita says, is it possible to explain which point goes into which bucket point wise? Definitely, Namita, I'll come to that. Now, quickly, let's have these 22 points. Point number 1, supplies the goods or services without issue of an invoice or issues an incorrect or false invoice. Fraud. I have supplied the goods. I didn't give an invoice. Why? Intent to evade payment of tax. Fraud. Students, just keep in mind, there are 4 buckets called fraud. Second bucket called procedural. Third bucket called registration. Fourth bucket called non-payment of tax. Fraud, suppression. Now, these are the 4 buckets we have, right? Point number 1. Supply the goods without issuing an invoice. Why I have done that? I have an intent to evade payment of tax. I call it a fraud. Issues an invoice without actually supplying the goods. Why did I issue? There's a racket. There was a network created. One, like, X supplies to Y, Y supplies to Z, Z supplies to A supplies to B, B actually exports and claims a refund. By the time department notices, all the people in the channel will make a good, they will make a, the money, whatever they have to siphon, they will do that. Again, it's a fraud. Collects the amount but fails to pay. Now, this is in the second bucket, non-payment of taxes. Third, collects a tax in contravention of the provisions. Now, it's a procedural. As a composition person, you're not supposed to collect, but you have collected. So you'll be jumping out of composition registration. You'll be made as a regular register. I put this into contravention, procedural aspects. Next, fails to deduct TDS or short deduction or non-payment. Now, fail to deduct or less deduction. I would say it is a procedural lacuna. I have deducted but not paid. Fraud. Similarly, TCS. Fail to deduct or short deducted. I'll say it's a procedural lacuna. Deducted TCS but not paid. I'll say third bucket, fraud. Takes or utilizes input tax credit without actual receipt of goods or services. Now, I have not received goods or services. I showed some amount as ITC and I have utilized. Fraud. I have taken a credit but not utilized without actual receipt. Entry of 18,000 was made as 81,000. Entry of 19,000 was made as 91,000. Now, it is not a fraudulent, so it is a clerical error. I put into procedural lacuna. Fraudulently obtains a refund, fraud. Takes or distribute ITC. Now I have received 5 bills, I distributed for 6 bills. Maybe calculation procedural issue. Like out of 100 bills, only 5 bills I have to distribute. 6th bill, by mistake, while doing a copy paste, I did a formula error. Now it could be a procedural lacuna, or intentionally, fraudulently I distributed. It could be a fraud. Now, one point I can, depending on the mental state, we can either call as a fraud or we can call as a procedural lacuna. Now, intention to evade payment of tax, it's a fraud. Liable to be registered but not registered falls into the bucket called registration. Gives a false information in relation to registration. Again, registration related bucket where an intent to fraud exists, or it is a registration related, I have to give an information but I gave a false information just to get my registration done. Objects of prevention officer, like you have no intent to evade payment of tax, but you're not aware of the law. I could say, like, I don't know what is the officer rights and duties. So I try to prevent him. I could call it's a procedure. I draw your attention to 2020, somewhere in April or May, this incident has happened. In Karnataka, again, academical purpose students, not otherwise, there was a officer who came for search inspection under Meteorological Act, Legal and Meteorology Act. As per Legal and Meteorology Act, you have to print your MRP, you have to print the quantity, you have to print the dimensions or the contents of the products you are selling. Now, this is a requirement under Legal and Meteorology Act. So this particular officer visited a particular locality for the purpose of inspection. There was a unanimous business. There are certain areas like Chor Bazaar in Delhi, Moor Market in Chennai. There are few areas where there is a strong unity among the trade association. Any officer who comes for inspection, verification, the trade and association opposed by and large. So in this case, what happened? Officer who has come for inspection, the entire businessmen, they have stopped that particular officer. They have been questioning. Look, you're not supposed to visit my shop. Why did you visit it? Was there any assignment note? Having come, what is the purpose you have come? Show me under the act where you have been vested with the power to visit my office. Now, there were various questions raised by the trade associations, and they have sent this video to the commissioner concerned, saying that, look, this is an undue hardship being created to our businessmen. Now, you should know the rules and regulations. If you recollect section 67, under the guidance of a joint commissioner, not below the rank of a joint commissioner, they have a reason to visit our business premises. So if you stop, again, procedural aspect, then I can call this aspect as a procedural thing. Transportation of goods without a cover of a documents. Now, it could be a procedural where I have to give an e-way bill, I haven't given. I have to give a delivery challan, I haven't given. So I could call this as a procedural. If there is an intention to evade payment of tax, again, I call this as a fraud. Suppression of turnover, purely a fraudulent activity. Fails to keep books of accounts as per the timeline specified. I would say it's a procedural lacuna. Fails to furnish the information which was called for by an officer. Again, I call this as a procedural lacuna. When we go to section 150, 151, you'll understand why I call this as a procedural lacuna. Supplies, transports, or stores the goods where the goods are liable for confiscation. Purely an activity of fraud. Issues an invoice using a registration number of another person. I would call this a fraud. Tampers or destroys the material evidence. Fraud. Dispose or tampers the goods which are detained or seized. Again, it is a fraudulent activity. Now, this is how we bifurcate all these aspects and examine what is the penalty to be paid. Please understand, any of these 21 offences, 10,000 or the tax evaded, the tax not paid, the TCS not paid, ITC or ITC which has been wrongly or irregularly distributed, or refund which has been sanctioned. Now, this is a quantification which was done under section 122. Before I proceed, let me see if there are any further questions. Santosh Sharma says, construction or service provided by a company, movement of goods for own use at a project site with the delivery challan, not a tax invoice. Is it goods? Couple of questions are there. Let me put it in a proper manner. There is a construction company. It has moved goods from for its own project from one site to another place, no tax invoice, but a delivery challan. Is it goods? It is movement of goods, Santosh. Was there a violation? I would say delivery challan is there. It is for own use, no violation. I'm okay with it. Next. Section 122, subsection 1A. This is a new section which has come from 1st Jan 2021. So this particular section says that there is a penalty who retains the benefit of certain transactions. Now, in a fraud, see, whenever there is a fraud which has been framed by a set of people, always there are two parties concerned. Always giver and taker. A person who is initiating has an indication that it is a fraudulent activity. A person who is receiving the benefit, he also knows that it is a offense. Like an example, don't take it otherwise, students. I just use the name of students who are familiar just for the sake of academical purpose. Say Akshay, again academical purpose, don't take it otherwise. Akshay has a factory in Pune. Praveen has a factory in Kerala. Akshay sends the goods to Praveen with a delivery challan. No e-way, no tax invoice. Once Praveen receives the material at his end, Akshay destroys the delivery challan. Praveen also destroys the delivery challan. Now, a person who is originating, a person who is receiving. Now, look at this transaction. Students, look at this transaction. Look from Akshay perspective. Look from Praveen's perspective. Akshay is a seller, our supplier. Praveen is a recipient. Now let us read this section and understand. This section 122 was the Finance Act 2021 amendment. GST law was amended. Parallelly, income tax law was also amended. Just to keep in mind how the fraudulent activities are being undertaken, harsh provisions under income tax was brought in. Similar income tax provisions were also brought under GST law, where they say a penalty for a person who retained the benefit under this, like section 122, we have discussed 21 clauses. Out of those 21, 4 clauses were picked up for the purpose of 122 1A. A person who has retained a benefit where supply of goods and services without issuance of an invoice. Issues an incorrect or false invoice. Akshay supplied the goods, Praveen received the goods. Now, Praveen has retained the benefit of this. In the due course of audit, department finds that Akshay did a mistake. Now, there was no knowledge of Praveen to the respective jurisdictional officer. By virtue of the audit which was conducted at Akshay premises, invocation of section 122 1A at the end of Praveen. At the end of this slide, you will understand. So this is point number 1, where supply of goods happened without an invoice. Point number 2, issues a bill without actual supply. What if Akshay supplies the goods, Praveen receives the invoice? Sorry, Akshay sends a invoice without goods. Praveen has accounted as a purchase. So the benefit of ITC was retained by Praveen. In this case, without supply of goods and services. Point number 3. Now, when I referred the point number 7, this is taken from section 122, subsection 1. Takes or utilizes input tax credit without actual receipt of goods or services. Both fully or partially in contravention of the provisions. You have a way, like there is a person who has supplied, the person who has received, without actual receipt, he has enjoyed the benefit. Now, this clause 7, there may not be an existence of a supplier. Clause 7, only a person whose filing is return, fraudulently he himself can avail ITC without actual receipt of goods or services. Now, when I look at point number 7, When you look at point number 7, look at this way. Takes or utilizes input tax credit without actual receipt of goods or services. If you recollect payment of taxes chapter, we discussed one example. Demand and recovery. When we pay 74 subsection 5. Sir, I am paying penalty of 15%. I pay tax, I pay interest. I also pay penalty of 15%. Why should I pay 15%? That example we apply here. Clause 7. Next. Clause 9. Takes or distributes, ISD. ISD who distributes a credit more than what he has to distribute. He takes a credit more than what he can avail. Now, any of these 4 clauses, and at whose instance this transaction was conducted, a penalty of amount equivalent to the tax evaded or input tax evade passed on. So this new section 122(1)(a) has come with these 4 specific provisions. You have issued an invoice, not supplied the goods. You supplied the goods, but not you have supplied the goods, but not a tax invoice. You have availed ITC without actual receipt. You have passed on the credit. Any of these 4 offences were brought under 122(1)(a) as a new incision from 1st January 2021, where penalty is equivalent to the amount of tax evaded or input tax passed on. So this is a provision, a parallel provision to income tax. Income tax, what they have done, whatever amount which was disallowed, whatever sales which you have shown, penalty equivalent to the sales was imposed under income tax. For a moment, Akshay raised an invoice of 10 lakhs, which was shown as a supply. If income tax says 10 lakhs is a penal provision, similarly, on 10 lakhs, assuming 1,80,000 is the worth of input tax, penalty of 1.8 lakhs was imposed on Praveen using this 122(1)(a). So this is a new section. Expect one question for this May 2022, 2 marks from this particular 4 clauses. Next, 122 subsection 2. Now, this particular section 122 is carved out from section 73 and section 74. Now, if you recollect these 2 sections, demand and recovery, a registered person who supplies goods or services or both, where tax has to be paid but not paid, or tax has been short paid, or refund has been erroneously given, or ITC has been wrongly availed or utilized. Now, if you recollect your demand and recovery, any transaction where there was a tax to be paid but not paid, or there was a tax payment but short paid, or there was an erroneous refund, or input tax has been wrongly availed or utilized. Now, any of these 4 aspects which are duly covered under show cause notice under 73 and 74, if it is other than fraud, willful misstatement, my penalty will be rupees 10,000 or 10% of the tax due, or 10% of the tax due, whichever is higher. Now, it is non-existence of allegation, that is fraud, willful misstatement, suppression. Any of these 3 does not exist. My penalty is 10,000 or 10% of the tax due. So what if there is a existence of any reason of on account of fraud, willful misstatement or suppression? Then penalty equivalent to rupees 10,000 or tax due from such person, whichever is higher. Now, this is precisely covered under section 74. If you recollect, students, when we read the provisions of section 74, order, like when the order was issued, my penalty will be demanded for equivalent to the tax amount. This is my section 122, subsection 2, talks about penalty in case of a allegation, not availability, in case of allegation, existence. Any of these aspects, my penalty under section 122, subsection 2. Let me see if there are any questions so far. Siren says, so what if penalty amount is less than 10,000 as per 122(1)(a), which amount should be collected? 10,000, whichever is higher, Siren, 10,000 or tax amount, whichever is higher. Now, this section 122, I'll take 2 minutes of your time to understand this section 122 very, very carefully. Now, I would say allegations, section 73, section 74. Students, when we talk about 73, 74, have your back of mind or make a note in your working note, make a note in your working notes. Non-existence of fraud, willful misstatement, suppression. Write down fraud, below that willful misstatement, below that suppression of facts. Put a fraud bracket, that put a line and say section 73. Below that, existence of allegations on account of fraud, willful misstatement, suppression. Put a flower bracket and put a line, section 74. Now, this is how you need to take this into consideration, students. Now, section 122, allegations could be on account of tax not paid, tax short paid, erroneous refund, ITC, wrongly availed or utilized. ITC, wrongly availed or utilized. Now, these are the 4 contentions what we have, right? Now, okay. Now, I'll give you some examples. Please, I would recommend make a note of these 4 entries as 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, scenario 1. ITC accounted for rupees 2,81,000 instead of rupees 2,18,000. Scenario 2. ITC accounted for 2,81,000 instead of 2,18,000, availed and utilized. Availed and utilized. Now, what we will do? We will understand the transaction. We will see how the penalty will be quantified. Now, it is very important for us when a show cause notice is issued by the officer, how the penalty is being quantified. Now, scenario 1. ITC accounted for rupees 2,81,000 instead of 2,18,000. Now, I haven't said anything about, okay, you may have a confusion. Let me use this as point number 1. Second point, rather I'll take this point. GST paid on a particular supply at 12% instead of 18%. Now, let us take first scenario. Input tax accounted for rupees 2,81,000 instead of 2,18,000. This input tax credit has been availed and utilized. Availed and utilized. Now, when I talk about allegations, should I put this rupees 2 lakh? Now, there is a gap of 2,81,000 minus 2,18,000. Now, please make a note. The bill which is there with the accountant, shows clearly 2,18,000. But the accounting was done for 2,81,000, and this was utilized also. Now the question comes to you, students. Should I put this 63,000 under? This comes to ITC. There is a ITC, not ITR. ITC. It comes to clause number 4. Should I put this 63,000 under section 73 or shall I put under section 74? What would be your answer? This 63,000 will come to section 73 or section 74. What would be your answer? Yes, Namita, it is in point number 4, but under 73 or 74, where we have to take that. Based on your answer, my penalty quantification happens now. Based on your answer, my penalty will be quantified. Please confirm, is it under 73 or 74? Very good. Akshay says 73. Yogesh says 74. Namita says 74. Sahira also says 74. So majority, if I have to go, everyone says 74, I have to go with 74. Akshay, you have said 73. Now, since it was away and it has been utilized, and how it has come to the notice, Akshay, when there was a department audit conducted, this has come into picture. If this amount was paid back with interest, now that fraudulent does not come into picture. So here, I'll make a clarity. I'll make a note for ease of other students. Assume that the above point noted by the proper officer while an audit under section 65. So the departmental officer who has come for audit, when he was verifying the purchase bills with the statement which is given, bills shows 2,18,000, accounting was done for 2,81,000, right? So this was noted by the proper officer. Since it was noticed and it was not reversed, I'll take into 63,000 over here. Now, penalty under section 122. Now, since it is under 74, my penalty happens to be, what is the amount? 10,000 or 10% of, 10,000 or tax evaded. Now here, 63,000 is higher than, I'll put a formula, maximum of 10,000, comma, 63,000. Now, 63,000 happens to be my penalty, which will be demanded when there is a show cause notice issued by the officers under section 122. Yes, PR. Your answer is not right. Akshay, hope this 74 is clear now? Yes. Now, point number 2. GST has been paid on a particular supply at the rate of 12% instead of 18%. Value of supply is, say, 1 lakh. So, GST short paid 6%, that is rupees 6,000. First step number 2. How do you determine? GST paid on a particular supply at 12% instead of 18%. Value of supply is 1 lakh. Now, before you make your opinion, I'll just give a clarity mark. Note, accountant did not agree with the classification of the officer. Now, the demand says that the officer says, Praveen, you supplied the goods of 1 lakh. You are supposed to pay 18%, 18,000, but you paid only 12%, that is 12,000. There is an amount of 6,000 which is short paid. Now, this is the contention. Where accountant says, no, sir, you are wrong. Your interpretation is completely wrong. It should have been at 12%. Say job work transaction. Now, where you look, put this transaction, 73 or 74. This particular 6,000, we will put under 73 or 74. Yes, actually. Now, for this second entry, 73 or 74, what would be your answer? Vishal says 74, okay. Akshay says 73. Good. Now, this is a activity not done erroneously. Accountant has admitted that it was done so and so, but always proper officer, when he demands, now point of contention is this was done with no intent of payment of tax. For a moment, department officer always says that there is a short payment with a intention to evade payment of tax. And assuming a show cause notice issued under 74, my penalty under section 122 is quantified as 10,000 or tax amount, whichever is higher. 10,000 or tax amount, whichever is higher. Let us come back to our presentation. Look at here. Penalty equal to rupees 10,000 or tax due from such person, whichever is higher. Now, in this particular example, students, I have a tax amount of 6,000. But when I go to penalty provision under 122, unfortunately, it says 10,000 or tax amount, whichever is higher. Applying that provision, I have to pay 10,000 as a penalty. Yeah. This is how we apply provisions of section 122. Okay. Before we start with 173, we are at 757. Let's have a break for 5 minutes. 8:3. Let us resume back with our discussion. Let us continue with our discussion. Before we start with subsection 3, couple of interesting questions are there. On this example, quantification of penalty under section 122. Let me just take the first question. The first question which is asked by Namita. Namita says, say in section 74, minimum penalty is 15%. How you have taken 10,000 as minimum penalty? Now, Namita, see, if you recollect your section 74, just give me a minute. There is a problem with my Excel file. Let me just close the Excel file and open for a minute. Okay. Yeah. Hope Excel file is visible, students. So the first question from Namita is, under section 74, penalty is 15%. Why you have considered 10,000 or tax whichever is higher? Now, please remember, Namita, 74 subsection 5, voluntary payment. I, as a registered person, I have paid my tax along with interest, along with penalty. Please keep in mind, where there is an existence of fraud, willful misstatement, suppression. Having known that I did a fraud, I have to pay the tax. Before the officer comes and asks me, I have paid this penalty. Then 15% is the option. I pay this using DRC3 form, Namita. I use this, I pay this before the officer sends a show cause notice. At the instance of the officer or before a show cause notice is sent, I paid the form. So, Namita, 15% comes when I pay voluntarily or at the instance of the officer. Second, when a show cause notice is issued, within 30 days, I pay. Then this 15% becomes 25%. I get a show cause notice under section 74. Within 30 days of show cause notice, if I pay, my penalty happens to be 25%. I haven't paid at that point. Order has been received, and within 30 days of the order, I decided to pay the tax amount. Then 50% shall be the penalty, right? What if I have paid beyond 30 days, after 30 days? After 30 days of the order, 100% is my penalty. Now, this is a process. Now, at the time of issuing show cause notice, Namita, the officer says tax of, say, 6,000. He will also levy a penalty equivalent to 6,000 under section 74. Now, if at all the officer has to come to section 122, apply the provisions under section 122, subsection 2. Now, here, my transactions are clearly covered under section 122, subsection 2. So what does the officer will do? Because there is an intention to evade payment of tax, he invokes section 122. One of these four clauses, if it fits to me, he will take a recourse under this and he says, Praveen, you pay tax of 6,000, penalty of 10,000 under section 122, subsection 2. This is how the quantification happens, Namita. Hope I've answered your point, Namita. Second, there is one more question from Akshay. So 15% if payment before show cause notice. Sorry. Akshay says, second transaction is also under section 74. Assessee cannot be given an opportunity of being heard to explain it is not willful mistake. Now, point of Akshay is, sir, I have not evaded. Why is this the officer asking me to pay under this? So, in practice, Akshay, show cause notice comes under section 74. I give a reply to that show cause notice, my written representation. It goes to the adjudicating authority who decides whether 73 should prevail or 74 should prevail. So this matter of decision, Akshay, it will be done by the adjudicating authority. So it's so-called, like a superintendent gave the show cause notice, AC or DC. If the show cause notice is given by AC or DC, the concerned joint commissioner. If the show cause notice is given by joint commissioner, the commissioner. So depending on the rank, the adjudicating authority will decide, is it 73 correct or 74 is correct. Hope this point is clear for both Akshay and Namita. Let's come back to 122, subsection 3. Now, 122, subsection 3 is the other side, ignorance. Sir, I am an ignorant person. I'll give an example. I want to buy a Sony television. I go to a shop. Shop person says that, Praveen, this television cost you 15,000 for 50,000. GST is applicable at the rate of, say, 28%. So on 50,000, 14,000 happens to be the GST. I would say, sir, I'll give you cash. You don't give me GST bill. Let me save that 14,000. Right? This is one occasion. Second occasion. There is a smuggling. There is a goods which have been smuggled. These goods have been kept at a location. Or I know that there is a there is a income tax office like that GST office. Some vehicle or some goods are stored there. I happen to climb the wall, jump into the GST office. There are goods which are confiscated, stored in a location. I take the possession of those goods, go to that chor bazaar and sell those goods. Imagine in this situation, and let us read 122, subsection 3. Penalty is leviable on any person. Look at the language they have used. On any person who aids or abets. The offense is specified 1 to 22 of subsection 1. So what they say, you are supporting, aid or abet, encouraging. No, you are encouraging. You can do. Yes, you can do. A person who is doing a offense under any of those 21, a person who supported, a person who abetted, who encouraged this transaction. Shopfellow is selling to me the TV of 50,000 and GST worth 14,000. I encouraged, aids or abets. I have encouraged. I fit into this point number 1. Let's move further. Or let us put this way: aids or abets. I know that assuming that I have a factory. I have a factory in Pune. I have a caterer who supplies the food. I know that this caterer who's supplying the food every month is billing to me, say 3 lakhs worth catering supply. 3 into 12, 36 lakhs happen to be the supply value. Any person who supplies the goods and services more than 20 lakhs, there is a mandate registration under section 22. I know caterer is supposed to register, but I encourage caterer not to register. If the caterer is registered, he has to charge 5% GST. That becomes a cost to me. I support, I encourage, knowing that this supplier is a default supplier. Again, provisions of section 122 can be invoked. Now, look at this point B, very, very beautifully worded. Acquires possession of or in any way concerns himself. Acquires possession of or in any way is concerned himself in transporting, removing, depositing, keeping, concealing, supplying, purchasing in any other manner, who deals with any goods which he knows that he has reasons to believe that they are liable for confiscation. So a penalty which is covered under section 122 specifically, that is not discussed. Anything which is other than that 122, like a supplier, transporter, warehouser. Now, other than these three people, look at yourself. I know that there are goods which are smuggled. A person who comes to the doorstep of my house and says, "Sir, I'm a trader, I'm a merchant person. I travel in the sea, I do work on a ship. I love part of that. The goods which come to the customs station, at times there is an option. I take those goods from the customs warehouse and I sell it cheap because I not pay customs duty." Some sort of story is mentioned, and it comes with a hard disk. It comes with a mobile. So this mobile is worth 50,000 in the market because there's no customs duty paid. I save 15,000. This is worth 35,000, but I would like to sell it for 25,000. Now, a person who acquires the possession or who is concerned himself in transporting, a person who is taking from the customs port, deposits them, keeps them, conceals them, hides them, supplies or purchases, knowing that these goods are he knows that, or he has a reason to believe that these goods are liable for confiscation. This is covered under clause 2. Who receives or in any way concerned with the supply of or in any manner deals with the supply of services which he has known reasons to believe that this is in contravention, like rendering of services. I give a legal opinion to a contractor. Contractor does the construction activity of a wall at my building. Contravention. I don't raise invoice, he don't raise invoice. I can call as a barter. Contravention of a service. Fails to appear before a central tax officer in the process of summons, like section 70, whenever called for information, person doesn't come. Fails to issue invoice as per the provisions of the act or rules made thereunder. Now, this point, fails to issue invoice in accordance with the provisions of this act. As per section 31, on or before removal, I have to issue invoice. I have issued invoice, maybe 5 days after that. As per section 31, for the services, from the date of provision, within 30 days, I have to raise the service. But there is a particular supplier who is into supply of manpower, always raises after 45 days. Though the law says 30 days, I raised invoice, but after 15 days later than the date. So in these cases, or fails to account for an invoice. I have not accounted an invoice in a particular books of accounts. Assuming that this is an RCM, assuming that this is not taxable, shall be liable to a penalty which may extend up to 25,000 rupees. So this 122.3 is not a direct hit provision. It is an indirect hit provision, which is not very harsh or penalizing. It is in general, where the officer may, it doesn't say shall. In case of 122 subsection 2, 10,000 or tax, whichever is higher. Now here, penalty may extend up to 25,000 rupees. So penalty may be levied 1,000, 5,000, 10,000. So it is a prerogative. It is a directive principle for an officer. You have a choice. Whatever you want to levy, you can levy. Now, moving on further, failure to furnish information written. There is a section called 150. If you recollect, students, the other day I was talking about anti-evasion, where this officer went to a particular software company. He 10 days he has visited. After coming back to his office, he sent a notice to the labor department to call for the information. This security person, where all he has been rendering the services, how many employees he has been holding, from when he has been doing a business. That is called section 150, information written. A person who is required to furnish information under section 150, who fails to do so. So when information was called from a labor office, it was not sent. The proper officer may direct such person shall be liable to pay a penalty of 100 rupees per day, maximum of rupees 5,000. Maximum of rupees 5,000. Now, so in case if the proper officer has called for the information and that person failed, for every day there is a default 100 rupees under CGST, 100 rupees a day SGST, 200 rupees per day. Maximum of 5,000 CGST, 5,000, 10,000 is a maximum penalty which you can expect. Now under section 150, sir, who are the people who have been notified? A taxable, a taxable person, authority of a state government who's supposed to collect VAT, sales tax, state excise, authority of a central government who's collect central excise or customs duty, state electricity board, registrar, sub-registrar. Now, these are the set of certain people who have been quantified. This is a separate chapter, students, miscellaneous provisions. I'll come in detail with respect to 150. As of now, please keep in mind, any information called not furnished, maximum 10,000 is a penalty under CGST, SGST. Similar to section 150, under section 151, commissioner, by way of a notification, he will call for statistics. Now, I'll give an example. Say, there is a manufacturer who has been registered under GST law and he has been filing his returns. The department officer feels that something is wrong with this manufacturer. Let me do one thing. Let me call for the statistics. Like from the electricity board, let me call month-wise what is the production. Like April, right from April till March. So let me analyze month-wise what is the electricity bill he has paid. Based on which, let me see how much is the production capacity. Based on the production capacity, let me see what is the supply value is disclosed. Based on that, let me do a preliminary study. So where statistical information is called for, and a person who has failed to furnish that information, or who has given a wrong information, I called for XYZ Private Limited. He has given for ABC Private Limited. Then that person shall be punishable with a fine which may extend to 10,000 rupees in case of a continuous offense, and which may be extended to 100 rupees for every day, which is a subsequent offense, and maximum amount of penalty up to rupees 25,000. So here, penalty of 10,000 straight away, and again after giving a further time which is not furnished. So this offense of 10,000 can go up to a maximum of 25,000. Now, why these provisions are brought in? Just to bring a seriousness of the person who is supposed to give the information but not being given so. Now, section 125. This is one hardcore provision with respect to the penal provisions. I don't find any way to punish. I'll come to section 125 as an officer. So any person who has contravened the provisions of this act and our rules made thereunder, for which no penalties specifically provided in this act, shall be liable to a penalty which may extend up to 25,000 rupees. So here, may extend up to 25,000 rupees. So CGST 25,000, SGST 25,000. Just to give an example, my registered person who has to file an annual return under section 44 has to file on or before 31st December, 9 months from the end of the respective financial year. If he hasn't filed his annual return within the due date, the officer can invoke section 125, where a penalty up to 25,000, and they say may. This is a prerogative. Officer can levy a penalty of 10,000, or he can levy a penalty of 25,000. Whichever he deems fit, he will levy under section 125. Next. Section 126. General disciplines related to penalty. Now, whenever a penal provision has to be invoked, this section 126 is like a Bible. It's like a Quran. It is like a Bhagavad Gita. So, officer, whoever is dealing with these provisions of 126, page number 21.9 of your institute material, it says that no officer shall impose a penalty for minor breaches or the regulations or procedural requirements which are in particular omission or mistake of a documentation which is easily rectifiable, made without fraudulent intent or gross negligence. Here what they say, no officer shall impose, shall means not mandatory, for minor breaches, A simple example. Simple example. I'm a shopkeeper. I sell grocery items. As a shopkeeper, I prepare an invoice manually. So when I'm preparing my invoice, what I have done, there is a sale of some packed rice for 10 kgs. Per kg, the cost of rice is 50 rupees. 10 kgs, 50 rupees. 10 into 50, 500 rupees. Now what I have done, in the quantity column, I've just showed 1 kg. Rate per kg, I've showed 50 kgs, but the rate total value, I've applied 500. Now here, what happened? 50 into 10, 500. 500 has come properly. This quantity of 10 kg, while writing manually, instead of 10, I wrote 01. Now, is it a minor breach? Answer is yes. Is there a value 500 derived? Answer is yes. Instead, if you sold 10 kgs, you have written 01, 50 kgs, 01 into 50, 50 rupees. Instead of 500, you have shown 50. Then it is not a, may not be, like, fraud, intent to fraud or gross negligence may not be. So if I have done a mistake, which is a rectifiable, I can rectify. Sir, 01, I'll just score off and write 10. Made without fraudulent intent. Made without fraudulent intent. Let's take an example. There is a e-way bill which has been prepared. While preparing e-way bill, my vehicle number, I have to update as 1473. But what I have done, I have typed as 1743. Now, is this a fraud? Is this easily rectifiable? Answer is, sir, it is easily rectifiable. This 1473 is right, 1743 is wrong. While typing the vehicle number, I did a mistake. Was it fraud? My tax invoice is correct. My goods as per the conveyance physically matches with the tax invoice. The value and calculation, everything is correct. E-way bill has got all the information as per invoice. Now everything is there. I apply this 126 and say that without fraudulent or intended to gross negligence. So when this exists and when this is possible, no penalty under section 1, like this chapter 90 shall be invoked. This is what this provision says. Let's move further. For the purpose of this section, subsection 126, a breach shall be considered minor where the tax value is less than 5,000. Omission or mistake in document shall be considered as easily rectifiable if it is error apparent on the face of the record. I know the moment I see that 1473 written as 1743, everyone knows that it's a clerical error. So in these cases, they say no penalty shall be invoked. Point number 2. The penalty imposed under this act shall depend on the facts and circumstances of each case and shall commensurate with the degree and severity of the breach. What they say, under CGST, if you want to levy a penalty, please examine the facts. Like Akshay, he was putting his point. When we were talking about the example of this 6,000, where the officer has, instead of 6,000, levied a penalty of 10,000. Akshay said, sir, I have a genuine understanding that it is only 12%, not 18%. So this is what the law says, that look at the intent of the assessee. Look at the facts. If the facts and circumstances are clear, you decide whether penalty to be levied or not to be levied. And degree and severity. Like example, when we read section 122 subsection 3, a penalty up to a sum of rupees 25,000 can be levied. So if your penalty is very nominal, don't penalize 25,000. Levy a nominal penalty of 100 rupees, 500 rupees, 1,000. So wherever there is a circular given by the department, based on the circular, under e-way bill, there was a circular which says that a nominal penalty of 1,000 can be levied. So there, where there is a direction, instead of 25,000 can be invoked, though possible, I levy 1,000 rupees. No penalty shall be imposed on a person without giving opportunity of being heard. Like Akshay said, adjudicating authority who has to pass an order, he will look into the points given by Akshay. Officer says 74, Akshay says 73. Akshay comes with a notification. Akshay says, sir, I read this notification 1 of 2017. I understand this is the rate. So on this basis, based on the opportunity of being heard, the officer will decide the penalty. The officer under this act, while imposing penalty in an order for a breach of law, that is act, regulation, that is rules, procedural, that is a normal customary procedures, specify the nature of breach. So the officer is bound to specify, look, I came for inspection, you have to have a notice board, you've defaulted. I came for inspection, you are supposed to maintain a production register, you failed. They say specify under that act, that section, under that rule, or this procedural aspect, where this contravention was noted, why this penalty is being imposed upon. And where a person comes voluntarily, Namita, you have to read this point one, where a person has come voluntarily to disclose an officer, that person, a particular officer, considering the breach which was conducted by the officer, may see whether there was a mitigating factor for quantifying the penalty. Now, Namita, you said, why should not the penalty of 15% be levied? If at all, in that case where we were discussing, I voluntarily go and pay the tax under DRC 03 challan using the provisions of 74 subsection 5. I paid a penalty of 15%. Officer wants to levy a penalty of 10,000. I voluntarily paid 15%. When there is a mitigating factor, now there was no fraud, though it was done erroneously, I myself voluntarily paid 15%. Then officer may mitigate, let him not invoke provisions of 122 subsection 2 to levy a penalty of 10,000. The provisions of this section shall not apply in the cases where penalty has been specified under this act as a fixed sum or as a fixed percentage. So as of now, if you see this e-payable provisions, straight away they say my penalty equivalent to 100% or 200% of the tax. When there is a percentage of calculation, I need not apply principles of 126. Next, power to impose penalty in certain cases. Now, this section 127 says that wherever a penalty to be levied, but it was missed out. Now, I draw your attention to section 75. In the example Excel file, we were discussing 10 examples where a show cause notice issued for tax interest penalty. Under section 75, subsection 7, a show cause notice value and a order value, when I compare, there should not be a contradiction. Whatever is there in the show cause notice, either that amount or less than that can be quantified in an order, but not higher than in a show cause notice. Now, this 127 comes into a rescue where all a penalty can be imposed and it was not imposed or it was not covered in some of the proceedings. What it says, so what if there was a assessment of a non-filer? A person who was to file a return but not filed. A penalty can be imposed under 122 but not imposed. Then the officer can invoke section 127 and say, my dear assessee, there was a show cause notice issued, but erroneously a penalty under section 122 has to be levied for 10,000 or tax amount whichever is higher. He has forgotten. Now I will invoke a provision under 127. Section 63, assessment of a non-registered person. Tax alone was demanded, interest alone was demanded. Penalty was missed out. I can invoke 127. Summary assessment. We discussed about that refund case. Private limited company purchased a furniture from a proprietor. So summary assessment, penalty to be imposed, forgotten. Now I can invoke my 127 to impose that particular provision. 73, 74. So if there is any notice issued under 73, 74, penalty to be invoked, but officer forgotten, I can invoke again that particular thing. Section 129, 130, where the officer, generally 129, 130, imposing penalty will never be forgotten. But by chance, if the officer has forgotten, for any of these provisions, my 127 says that the officer has a right to invoke these penal provisions. However, before recovering a penal provision penalty, opportunity of being heard will be given to that particular assessee concern. This is covered till my section 127. Before I go further, let me see if there are any questions so far. Section 125 is applicable to GST officer? Yes, sir. Now, Let's come to waive of penalty. I remember Akshay is a person who has asked this question called amnesty scheme under GST law. Power to waive of penalty or fee, which is called late fees. So this provision says that a government by a notification can decide to waive a penalty under 122, 123, 125 or late fee. Now, 122, 21 list what we have discussed. 123, this particular furnishing a information written. 125, which is your general penalty, the 25,000, your GST written to be filed but not filed. Now, any penalties under these sections can be waived off, or a late fee. GST year 1, GST year 3 be not filed within the due date, penalty under section 47. So this waiving off is called as an amnesty scheme. Now, amnesty scheme where government feels the tax collections are less, they'll come with amnesty scheme to get rid of all the pending legacy issues, that is litigations, and then go with a fresh thought process. This is covered under section 128. Now, 129, I'll explain in short. This is a sunset provision. I see that May 22 is the last attempt. November 22, the provisions till 30th April 2022 will be taken into consideration. So accordingly, November 22, I don't see this 129 old provision will be asked. Only the students who are writing May 2022 should read this 129 because entire 129 and 130 have been completely revamped. I'll make it very simple for you to understand this. Section 129 deals with your detention, seizure, and release of goods. Now, the backdrop of this provision, whenever there is a transportation of goods, which is the vehicle is in transit, or the goods in transit have been stored in a warehouse or in a godown without proper documents, then detention or seizure will happen for any contravention. Now, say A, who is a supplier in Maharashtra, B, who is a buyer in Tamil Nadu, in transit, there's a location in, I'll say location C, which is there in Maharashtra when we are traveling to Tamil Nadu. Let's say the goods have to pass through Andhra Pradesh. There is a warehouse. Seller transports the goods to buyer. In between, the transporter stores the goods in a warehouse. Invoice issued for rupees 5 lakh. Actual value of goods is say 2.85 crore. This is called value which has been short disclosed. Now here, when the goods are in transit, or a warehouse, now either of these locations, the officer, proper officer concerned, can do the verification of the documents along with the goods. We call as interception and verification. So the officer may, like in transit, it is from Maharashtra to Tamil Nadu. When it is in transport, it is on the road, or it has been, say, stored in a warehouse. Any of these points, the officer can verify these goods. Now, in the process of this verification, he feels that there is a contravention. What is a contravention? The value which is worth 2.85 crore was shown as 5 lakh and a invoice was raised. So in this case, the officer can detain the vehicle along with goods. Now, please understand, the officer is not detaining goods alone. The officer is detaining the vehicle. The officer is holding the vehicle along with the goods. So both of these aspects were taken into the custody of the officer. Now what officer does? He invokes the provisions. Now, is it a contravention? Answer is yes, sir, it is a contravention. Why is it a contravention? Because this particular supplier has defaulted in showing a proper value in terms of these goods supplied. Now here, the provisions of 129 will be invoked to demand tax along with penalty. The officer can demand tax along with penalty. 2 crore 85 lakh. This is the value of goods. Value tax at the rate of say 18%. This is actual. This is as per tax invoice. What this supplier did? Only 5 lakh. Now, what is the difference? $85 lakh, 85 lakh. Now, this 50 lakh 40,000 is a short payment of tax, right? So the officer can demand tax along with penalty. So when the officer is going to demand tax along with penalty, let us look at the provision. So what if the owner of the goods come forward for the payment of tax and penalty? I repeat, when there is a contravention and the officer is willing to demand tax and penalty, and the owner has come forward, my dear officer, it is my goods. I admit that it was a mistake which was done at my end. The officer will release on payment of such tax and penalty. What is that? Payment of applicable tax and penalty equivalent to 100% of the tax payable on such goods, where goods are taxable. So if the goods are taxable, I pay applicable tax, I pay penalty which is equivalent to 100% of the tax. If the goods are exempted, 2% of the value of the goods or 25,000 rupees. Now, let me come back to my Excel file. So here, tax under section 129, tax penalty. The tax will be demanded for 50 lakh 40,000 and penalty also will be demanded for 50 lakh 40,000. This is the total demand. Now, if the goods are exempted, 2% of the value of the goods or 25,000, whichever is lesser. Okay. Now, so what if there's a shyness of the owner doesn't want to come forward? The owner doesn't want to come forward. Some XYZ has come forward. How? Sir, transporter comes and says, sir, I don't know who is the owner. I was asked to deliver the material from this location to this location. Whatever your demand is there, let me know, I'll pay. Now, this transporter, or some other fellow comes forward for making the payment. Then what does the law say? Applicable tax along with penalty equivalent to 50% of the value of the goods reduced by tax paid thereon. So penalty is 50% of the value of the goods minus tax. Minus tax. So if I go back to my Excel file, Alternatively, who doesn't come forward. So tax will be 50,40,000. The value will be 50% of the value of the goods. 50% minus tax paid thereupon. Now here tax paid is only 5 lakh. Sorry, on 5 lakh tax paid is 90,000. So this is the penalty which is going to be imposed. Look at the harsh way. 1,41,60,000 is the penalty if the owner of the goods doesn't come forward. Now, this is the case where most of the e-way transactions do get stuck. Now, across India, students, if you look at the case laws, Kerala is one state, 80% of the High Court cases are only in relation to e-way. I don't say that a lot of offenders are there in Kerala. The way the officers look at the e-way provisions, unfortunately, but I would say there is a strict vigilance in Kerala, and every small and apparent mistake, they issue a penalty under Section 129. As of now, for your academics purpose, this is the law as of today for your November 2022 attempt. Now, so what if it is exempted goods? In case of exempted goods, 5%. Earlier, it was in case of person who has come forward, 2%. So what if the person doesn't come forward? 5% of the value of the goods or 25,000. Now, this I'm talking in CGST. Equivalent provision under SGST. CGST, SGST put together. 5% here, 5% there, 10%. 25,000 CGST, 25,000 SGST, 50,000. So this is the provision. So what is the major amendment happened? This term tax was replaced with penalty. So 50%, 50%, that is 100% penalty is being levied now. So don't worry for May 2022 attempt. Now, so what if the assessee is not agreeing? Like example, I was talking about Kerala. So officer demanded whatever he wants to demand. I don't agree. Then you execute a bond or bank guarantee and get a provisional release of those goods. And you make the payment within 14 days before seizure, detention. So what if the goods are perishable? This 14 days time will be reduced and they can put it for auction. The principles of natural justice: before any detention or seizure, opportunity of being heard will be given, and then they issue an order for detention under Section 129. Now, so what if the goods are detained? The tax along with penalty has not been paid within the standard time limit of 14 days. Neither the owner has come forward nor any other person has come forward to pay. Then these goods which are detained will go for confiscation. Confiscation, which is dealt under Section 130. Now, I'll make it very simple for you to understand. Contravention, like confiscation. Confiscation means taking the goods into the custody for the purpose of putting for auction. So is it goods alone? Goods along with the vehicle, both of them will be put for an auction. Reason, a person who is causing the movement of goods shall also be penalized. So this 130 says that any person who has done the contravention with respect to supply, with respect to helping the person who is carrying the goods, a person who is buying those goods, all those goods which are in contravention of the GST law shall be liable for confiscation and a penalty and a late fee. A fine. Now, this provision where a transporter, unless the owner of the conveyance proves that it was so used without knowledge of conveyance of himself, until and unless the transporter who happens to be the owner of a vehicle comes forward and says, my lord, look, I'm ignorant. I was given the goods to transport from this location to this location. I asked for the bill, they gave the bill. I looked at the weight. As per the bill, it shows 120 kgs. I gone for a weighbridge. Weighbridge also says 120 kgs. I just took the material. I am on the way. I don't know anything other than that. When the transporter proves his ignorance, then the penal provisions under 130 on transporter shall be minimized. Then, now, whenever these provisions are established, like transporter the owner, the warehouse, whoever is party to this offense, they shall attract the provisions of 122. Now, this goods which are liable for confiscation. Now, they say, look, the goods which are liable for confiscation, I have to put it for auction. If the owner of the goods, he feels that, sir, please don't put for an auction, I'll pay a fine in lieu of confiscation. Fine. A term called fine. Sir, please don't put it for auction. I decided that I'll buy these goods. So, the fine which is leviable under this act shall not exceed market value of the goods confiscated less tax chargeable thereon. So the officer can levy a fine which shall not exceed the market value. But they say whatever fine is being levied, they say that the aggregate value of the fine along with penalty, should not be less than the value under section 129. We have seen just now section 129, your penalty equivalent to equivalent to 100% of tax or 50% of the value of the goods. So whatever under 129 you are going to levy, please ensure that whenever there is a confiscation, your fine, which is nothing but market value of the goods, a penalty which is under section 122, both of these should not be less than the penalty under 129. This is a mathematical equation. Again, don't worry much on examination point of view. This is just a procedural aspect where a serious offense comes under 130. I'll just skip the irrelevant points for your attention, paucity of time. Now, before any confiscation, opportunity of being heard will be given. Boss, I have detained the goods. I have issued a notice under 129. You haven't paid within 14 days. I'm going for auction. If I go for confiscation, you are ready to pay the fine. Okay. If you're not ready, I'll go ahead with the payment. And any confiscation, the ownership comes automatically to the government authorities. That's they say the goods are having a title of such goods with the government. Some other day, one of students asked, sir, will the transfer of ownership comes to the government whenever they want to put it for auction? Whenever the goods are put it for auction, unless the government possesses the ownership, they cannot go for confiscation of those goods. Now, any goods which have been confiscated, there is a maximum time limit of 3 months within which they have to decide. Now, in general, what happens? They call for a surveyor. The surveyor comes and does a verification of the goods. He says what is the market value. And that market value will be levied as a fine. Generally, where do we come across this confiscation? Smuggled goods. Goods which have escaped the assessment under customs duty, which have come into market, called your Chor Bazaar or Moor Market. I'm not saying that these are the essential places. There are markets where you get these second-hand branded goods for a dead cheap price, which is generally the smuggled goods. Those goods, if it comes to the knowledge of the anti-evasion, they can take it for confiscation. And any goods they have taken for confiscation, within a span of 3 months, they have to dispose of this particular material. Now, this section 131 says that very clearly. I don't take into consideration, but I take into consideration, I don't argue. I ensure that the provisions of CRPC are taken care. I also ensure that any penalty which is made under any other law, but that doesn't prevent me for imposing a penalty under this provision. I repeat, this section 131 says that confiscation penalty not to interfere with other punishments. So whenever I have done a confiscation, a punishment which was given under customs law doesn't prevent me to interfere or to impose a penalty under section 131. A crime which was punished under customs law doesn't take away my authority to punish again under GST law. Right? So they say that No confiscation made or penalty imposed under the provisions of this act or rules made therein shall prevent the applicability of punishment provisions under the GST law. Now, Section 132. This is the hardcore provisions where the severe offences, generally the anti-evasion, the intelligence, these are the department who are directly connected with the commissioner. The two so-called departments who generally give work at the instructions of the commissioner, they invoke the provisions of Section 132. My entire provisions of 132 are connected with the powers vested with the commissioner. This 132 gives a list of offences which are so-called list of offences having a severe exposure, criminal provisions, CRPC, Criminal Code of Procedure, will be invoked for the purpose of your arrest without a warranty. Offences which are cognizable, that means offences which are punishable, where there is no bail, there is no warrant, without even giving a notice, the person can be arrested and should be produced before the magistrate. And there are certain offences which are called non-cognizable offences, means offences where there is a bail which can be granted. Example, so there is a consortium. There's a consortium. This consortium has got into a deal of supply of some goods without movement of goods. Supply of transaction without actual movement of goods. A, manufacture of cement. B, manufacture of steel. C, procurement or a dealer. D, a government contractor. A sells steel to C. B sells cement to C. C in turn sells the steel and cement to D. Now it's a consortium. D go for a bill discounting. C again go for a bill discounting. A and B again go for a bill discounting for the goods which are sold to B. Now look at this process. D is a sham transaction. C is a sham transaction. B is a sham transaction. A is a sham transaction. Then there was a sham transaction where through a bill discounting process, 90% of the bill money was received. And assuming for a moment, D calls that this is a SEZ supply, zero rated supply. D files a refund application. It gets the refund for the value of goods and services billed to a SEZ unit. Later, they get to know that this is all a bogus transaction. Now, this is a kind of transaction which is discussed under Section 132. Offences which are punishable under this section. Point number A, supplies the goods without a bill. Issues a bill, actual supply doesn't happen. The example what we have discussed. Avails the ITC without reference to B, where there was no actual support of goods and services. Collects the amount, but he fails to pay to the government beyond a period of 3 months. Evades tax fraudulently or avails input tax fraudulently. Falsifies the financial records with an intent to not to pay the tax. Obstructs or prevents an officer. Acquires a possession of information concerning for transport, removing, etc. Receives or in any way consent with the supply in any manner, which he knows that these are the goods which are liable for, which are contravention of the law. Tampers or destroys the material evidence. Fails to supply any information which was called for. Attempts or commits or abets to any of the offences notified A to K. Now, students, when you read all these offences, you remember that, so all these I have written in Section 122. Why we are talking again? Section 132, what they have done, they picked something from 122. They have picked something from 123. All those offences, they have quantified on the value, If any of those A to K have been noted, where the value of tax is exceeding 5 crore, where the value of tax is exceeding 5 crore, then 132, a serious offence and a punishable offence under 132, imprisonment for 5 years with a fine. If the value is exceeding 2 crore, less than 5 crore, then imprisonment for 3 years. Where the value of offence is exceeding 1 crore, but less than 2 crore, less than or equal to 2 crore, then 1 year imprisonment. Now, this is how section 132, I say a harsh provision, imprisonment is invoked under section 132. While dealing with these provisions, the law says that if there is a reason to prove that why the person concerned need not be punished. Means, see, once you have committed a crime, once the registered person has done an offense, the minimum period where the punishment will be provided is for a period of 6 months in the court of a court order or a decree. So under section 132, when we read any of these offenses, there is a straight away punishment on the person who did these offenses. So what if it was on a person who supported the main person, a transporter, owner of a warehouse, or a person who is a buyer, any of these people who have encouraged the main person in relation to clause F, G or J, the person who has supported will also be punishable to a period of 6 months with a fine. So what if this person gone to court, he has come back, he did a same offense once again? Then the provision says that for the second and repetitive offense, 5 years with a fine is a punishable offense for the subsequent and repetitive punishment. This is what my provisions under section 132 discuss with respect to penal provisions. Let me see a couple of questions before we wind up. Students, just give me 3 minutes. I'll take a couple of questions and we will wind up for the day. There's one question from Akshay. Penalty is not included in show cause notice. It can be included by an officer under section 127. Answer is yes. As I said, Akshay, similar to section 75, which is the interest, my 127 is a provision to impose penalty which was missed out in any of the notices under those provisions. Namita is asking this question. 122 17 offense, will penalty be determined as per 123 or 74? 123 7 point is 123, right? 17. 123 17. Fails or furnishes information called for by an officer in accordance with the provisions of this act of rules made thereunder, or false information. Now, point is very valid. Is it punishable under 122 or 123 or 74? It will be punishable offense under 122. Now, what if it is a repetitive offense? From 122, I'll go to 123, Namita. Second, sir, can we say that 127 overrides section 75? Now, 75 is in relation to interest, Namita. 127 is in relation to where penalty to be imposed but failed to impose. 75(9) is in relation to overriding 75(7). 127 is overriding, or no, I wouldn't say override. It is the penalty which was missed out under 75(7). I can invoke 127. It is becoming too technical for other students. The question from Namita is, sir, under section 75, you say that if the interest is missed out under subsection 9, interest can be levied. Is it a parallel provision under 127? Answer is yes. I forgot to impose penalty. Now I can invoke provision 127. While doing so, Namita, please remember, only those 6 provisions under 127 I can invoke, not otherwise. Moving further, Akshay says, if there can be a confiscation, then why the markets are still running? Government have no proof to take an action. Akshay, your point is valid. When there is a confiscation, why these markets are still functioning? 100%, it is a known fact to the lawmaker and the businessman. There is a bureaucracy, there is a democracy. Few things go unattended, few things go unlooked upon. Unfortunately, we have to live with the system. I cannot answer in this forum. Let me go to the next question. So in section 129, Namita is asking this question: why transport pay so much heavy penalty? This taxable person, Namita, he doesn't want to get his name onto the records officially. So what he will do, he will use a transporter to get these goods released. He doesn't want the credibility of the business person to get tampered. For that reason, maybe transporter may be used upon. And Santosh is asking, what is the amount of tax? Santosh, which question you are asking, man? Supporter includes GST written like C. Okay, Santosh has a fantastic question. I think this is the last question for the day. Sir, GST return filler, a person who files the chartered accountant or a cost accountant or a tax person, will that person be called as offender under 132? Answer is yes. If there is a serious offense, like no, there was no supply of goods, having known that there was no supply of goods, any person who abets, who aids the main person, then yes, this 6 months penal provisions, imprisonment may be invoked under section 132 for those persons who are aiding. Yes, Santosh, answer to your question is yes. So students, tomorrow is Republic Day. We don't have a session tomorrow. We will meet day after tomorrow. Till then, let us stay safe, read through properly, and let's meet back on 27. Till then, Jai Hind, good night.